Good morning, everyone. Welcome to News Center Maine's Political Brew. Glad you could be with us, along with former mayor of Portland and Democratic State Senator Ethan Strimling. Yeah, I recognize you. And Phil Harriman, former Republican State Senator. Good to see you both this morning.
Good to see you, Pat. Good morning, everyone.
Good to see you.
Lots cooking these days. Paul LePage wants his old job back, and we don't mean the one running Martin's. He has filed petition signatures to run for a third term as governor, setting up a likely showdown with Democratic Governor Janet Mills. Ethan, how was Paul LePage's kickoff?
You know, I'd support him if he wants to go back to be the head of Martin's again. I think he did a great job at Martin's. It was not really much of a kickoff, turning in his signatures. But I thought, he had a little press conference and answered some questions, although very interestingly, he sort of backtracked on a position around Medicaid expansion and is now supporting Governor Mills expanding making college free for, 18, 19, and 20-year-olds, basically. He wants to expand that to everybody to get community college for free. So it was a little new and different, Paul LePage, for sure. But I'm sure the one we all know and love is lurking somewhere underneath that shirt collar.
Well, I thought it was a great opportunity for him to have us talk about him by turning in his petition, and it's going to be interesting to see if the new Paul LePage can stay away from the outbursts and the name calling that was a signature of his first two terms. If he can stay away from those outbursts and focus on policy and strategy and budget, I think this is going to be a very interesting race to cover. And if I could dig a little deeper into his response in terms of the community college, my understanding is that he was focused on 18, 19, 20-year-olds who wanted to learn the trades. And boy, if there's a need today for plumbers, electricians, and carpenters, it is right now.
I would question, Ethan, whether in fact he's backtracking on Medicaid. All he said was, I will support anything that's good for Maine people, or words to that effect. He didn't say if he thought that was good.
Well, when he was governor, he vetoed 5 times blocking the Medicaid expansion. So if now he's determined that it's good for Maine people, then that means 5 times he did something that was bad for Maine people.
But we're not sure. We're not sure he's determined that. So that remains to be seen. Speaking of the budget, Governor Mills released the details of her supplemental budget this past week. Half of the projected $822 million revenue surplus would go back to taxpayers in the form of $500 checks. Another $100 million will go toward fixing highways and bridges around the state. The governor proposes $20 million for free community college for high school grads affected by the pandemic, and there's a budget stabilization fund to make sure the state pays 55% of public education costs. There's also funding for hospitals and nursing homes and the state's child welfare system, and for PFAS cleanup, as well as $100 million for roads and bridges. Ethan, as you mentioned, Governor LePage has pushed back on he's doubled down on the community college idea, but he also says no to the $500 checks. He says he wants an income tax cut instead and make it retroactive so people can fill their oil tanks. What do you make of that?
It's a bad idea. If you do this as an income tax reduction, what you're doing is channeling much more of the money to the wealthiest in our state. I mean, think about it. If you reduce the income tax rate, let's say by 0.5%, if you're making $200,000 a year, you're going to get $1,000 back instead of $500. But if you're making $50,000 a year, like most Maine families are making less than that, actually, but let's say you're at $50,000, you're only going to get $250 back. So what he's doing is, again, and this is the Republican Party playbook, is let's do tax reductions that benefit the wealthy and hurt the middle class. So it's a very bad idea. I don't even think it should go back, but if it's going to go back, the way that Governor Mills wants to do it is the best way to do it.
And Phil, it seems as though for now, this is one-time money. We don't know what the long-term projections are going to be.
Yeah, and that's the key part of it. On one hand, the governor is saying, I want to give half of it back to the people. And I'm on the side of, well, give it back to us in lower tax rates that apply to everyone. Everyone's tax rates would go down, and be careful about where you go spend money. You almost ran out of breath listing the list that she has of things that she wants to start or expand. Those programs are going to develop a constituency and a bureaucracy that wants to be supported by the funding. And those are one-time sources of money that will put tremendous pressure on future spending that we may not be able to afford.
And Phil, this certainly seems to give Maine voters a chance to have their say on this, right? If it comes down to just LePage versus Mills, you got a choice that people are going to make.
Yeah, this could be the most clear choice in in recent memory, there is so far no third-party candidates that might come in and peel off votes from one side of the discussion or the other. If it's just Mills and LePage, well, I don't think of a more clear contrast between two politicians.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Although, remember, Mills actually in a three-way race last time got over 50%. First governor to do that in quite some time. And so I think that it's not beneficial to Governor LePage that there's no third party. But Phil, just getting back to your point about taxes, you're proposing a proposal that will have long-term impact. It's not one-time money, and therefore it isn't paid for. And it goes to the wealthy at a higher rate. What's your answer to that? You reduce rates, the wealthy get a bigger check.
Well, you should reduce rates for everyone. The people at the lower end of the income spectrum aren't paying any income taxes, Ethan. And if you are reducing rates, it means you're letting people keep more money in their own checkbook. And that means the legislature's appropriations committee in the governor's office has to prepare budgets based on revenues that they expect to come in. That's the way budget should be done. What you're proposing is we have all this unexpected money. Let's go spend it on additional or expanded programs and hope that the revenues from the tax side continue to come in at these unprecedented levels to pay for them in the future.
Well, except Paul LePage is the one who is saying we ought to make community college now free for everybody going forward. So that's a proposal that has to be paid for over time. What Janet Mills has proposed is one-time spending on this, and an income tax rate reduction will go on forever and ever and ever. It's not a one-time expense. So you create a deficit when you do that. I understand you're trying to shrink government, but in the end, it doesn't work.
We will see how this plays out. Let's turn our eyes to Washington. Former President Donald Trump took another shot at Maine Senator Susan Collins after she told the New York Times that no Republican should be afraid of Trump. Now, Trump claims he could have denied Collins a win if he had said one word about her in the 2020 contest. But in fact, Phil, she far outperformed Donald Trump in Maine in last year's election.
Yeah, well, what is he thinking? Susan Collins is as close to every part of the state of Maine as any politician that I know of in recent memory. She has her pulse on the people of Maine, and she's right. No one should fear Donald Trump. And for him to think that all he had to do was to issue a press release or take a few minutes on News Center Maine and he would have influenced the impact of her election, I think is way off base.
Yeah, I mean, you just can't trust anything out of Trump's mouth, whether he's inflating his personal wealth or trying to downplay the role that he played in January 6th or his impact in Maine. You just can't trust it. Now, let me just say that do I think that if Donald Trump had come out and said, leave the line blank around Susan Collins' name, that she would have gotten fewer votes? Yes. And had she gotten only 5,000 or 6,000 fewer votes, it would have been thrown into ranked choice voting, and then it becomes a different ballgame. Now, do I think in the end she probably would have won? Yes, but there's no doubt in my mind. If Trump had come to Maine and said, leave Collins' name off, he could have reduced that by 10, 15, 20,000 votes that she received, and then there could have been a little chaos. But I think she probably would have gone back.
It seems that there may be an old guard of Republicans in Washington, such as Collins and even Mitch McConnell, who are hoping they can elect more moderate candidates and perhaps expose Donald Trump as a paper tiger.
Perhaps. I mean, Mitch McConnell is not particularly a moderate, and Susan Collins has been less moderate of late. I think they don't like Donald Trump because he dominates their party, but I don't think that from an ideological perspective. I think it's more that he's very disruptive. Obviously, there's a lot of corruption surrounding him at this point. Very likely going to be some pretty serious, judicial rulings against him pretty soon. So I think they kind of want him out for those reasons, but I don't know that it's ideological.
Well, if you go back to the heat of the moment in the last campaign, the last thing that Donald Trump wanted to do was to prevent Susan Collins from being reelected, electing a clearly progressive in Sarah Gideon, and he would have to be working with her because he thought he was going to win. Makes no sense.
This past week, the Maine Equal Rights Amendment effort failed again. Republicans argue that women are thriving in Maine, and some conservatives worry that judges could interpret an ERA as an extension of abortion rights in the Maine Constitution. Phil, does Maine need an Equal Rights Amendment?
Yeah, I'm missing something here, Pat. I don't know why our Constitution isn't gender neutral. It should be equal rights for all Maine citizens. It's not that complicated in my view.
Yeah, it's not that complicated. And I don't understand why Republicans, it's the rebirth of Phyllis Schlafly here. And it's very unfortunate. We need to make sure we know that in the state of Maine, just like across the country, women are not treated equally in terms of pay, in terms of housing, just across the board. Discrimination obviously happens much more against women than against men. And so having an equal rights amendment is very important, but it shows the true colors of the Republican Party. Unfortunately, Phil has supported the equal rights amendment, and I commend him for it. The fact that the rest of his colleagues have gone so far over the edge, it's just terribly disappointing.
The Wabanaki Alliance tribal leaders and many other supporters testified this past week on a bill to restore more tribal sovereignty in Maine. It focuses on making some changes to the landmark 1980 land claims settlement. It would address taxation, natural resources, criminal justice on tribal lands. Now, Governor Mills has made a different proposal which would give the tribes control of a potentially lucrative mobile sports betting market, and it could also offer tribes more input on state policies that affect them. Ethan, these divides between the state and the tribes kind of seemed endless. Where should we go from here?
Yeah, isn't it interesting about the gambling issue that all these other casinos are now coming out against any expansion over to the tribes? Look, it's interesting. Phil and I actually first met way back in the day when we were involved in Casinos No and trying to keep casinos out of Maine. They're here, obviously. We did not win that battle. With sports betting, it's going to happen and it needs to go somewhere. It should go to the tribes. But in the bigger picture, the tribes really need to get to a place of sovereignty, and the governor needs to get on board with this. Tremendous hearings past week, 1,500 people testified in support. Everybody is now saying the way that we treat the tribes in Maine is not okay. We need to treat them the way we treat them all across the country, and they need to be given much fuller sovereignty rights, and we need to do it soon.
Well, I think you touched on the key point. That is the 1980s land claim settlement that was engineered by the Native Americans and the federal government under the Jimmy Carter administration. I think they received $80 million plus property, and they entered into, an agreement. And it's probably where we should start is to engage back where we were then and see, what has changed now that should be amended in that agreement. I'm not clear at this point. Is it all about the access to that lucrative gambling aspect of it, or are there other pieces that somehow were not entered into in a fair way in that agreement that they signed?
Central Maine Power has been under the microscope of Maine's utility regulators for 2 years. And now the focus is shifting to CMP's parent company, Avangrid. The Public Utilities Commission has ordered an investigation into how CMP is being managed by Avangrid and whether decisions are being made with profit as the primary motive. Now, Ethan, this is a key issue for opponents of the utility and those who want a consumer-owned takeover of CMP and Avangrid. So what do you make of this development?
Yeah, it's just more trying to dance around the issue, moving the chairs on the Titanic, whichever metaphor, analogy you want to use. In the end, we need to get CMP out. We need to have it be consumer owned so that we, the people of the state, own this company and we can control it. Just time and time again, it becomes clearer and clearer that this company is not interested in Maine people. They're interested in their own profits going overseas. And hopefully, whatever the legislature does with this latest bill, the consumer-owned utility gets to the ballot, and I have every confidence that people of Maine will say, let's get rid of CMP for good.
Phil, do you think this investigation could tip the scales one way or the other?
Well, perhaps. I see it very differently than Ethan. The Public Utilities Commission leader, Phil Bartlett, recently as this week said that Central Maine Power Company has made significant progress in their deficiencies that we've experienced over the last year and a half. They lifted what was about to be a $12 million, I'll call it a fine that has been lifted. So it appears to me as though Central Maine Power Company is heading in the right direction in terms of their relationship with their customers. And let's remember, they are a profit-making business. They invest capital, they hire people, they are taking a risk, and they are regulated by what their profit can be. So that's why the Public Utilities Commission is there. And if they're going to take the additional step and look at the parent company of Central Maine Power Company, good for them. and hopefully it validates that they are making prudent business decisions. And if they aren't, we'll all know about it, and corrections will be made at the regulatory level.
Phil, they're guaranteed a profit. This is not risk. This is not normal capitalism, free market. They have a monopoly. They're guaranteed a profit. And the regulatory board has been completely ineffectual in protecting Maine consumers. That's why people are tired of CMP, Avangrid, all of it. And they want to just own it here. Let's keep the profits for ourselves.
All right, let's wrap up this week with our winners and losers in politics. Ethan, we'll start with you.
My winner this week is Jared Golden. You know, I've had some rough words for him on a few things where he's voted against Build Back Better and stimulus, but he's been fighting really hard to end stock trading among members of Congress. I think that's a very good idea. A long time coming, way too much of real conflict and an appearance. Got to build some trust there. My loser of the week, Representative Hutchins from down east. He came out in support of the truckers blocking the border, called Trudeau a dictator, just really absurd language. And, I can't imagine if they were blocking the border and blocking goods coming into Maine, would he feel the same way? So very disappointing in Representative Hutchins.
And Phil.
Thanks, Pat. My loser of the week is Vladimir Putin. He has not only put the United States of America in the crosshairs of what could be an international conflict, but there's no need for the maneuvering that they have undertaken in that country. My winner of the week is the healthcare workers of Maine and Maine people. It looks as though this virus may finally be behind us and we are free to move about the country again.
Thank you both, and thank you all for being with us. We'll see you next time. News Center Maine is back after this.